If you want to defend your consciousness, then you're going to need one of these. You might notice that I wear a hat in almost every video that I put up on the internet, and there's a reason for that. You see, I wear the cap to protect my crown chakra from demonic entities that might want to suck my soul out of the top of my etheric field. And in fact, before I post any video on the internet, I take 4 hours to meditate and call in my personal angels to make sure that I've got a true force field of love and light. No negative comments will affect me. I have got my energetic protection on lock. At least that's the sentiment of some of the videos that you might watch if you search in how to protect my energy, and I think they have some value to them, but we're really looking in the wrong direction. If you actually want to defend your consciousness, you don't need to go into the spirit realms. And by the way, I was joking. I enjoy wearing hats because I like how they make me look and I like how they feel on my head, but I don't wear it to protect myself from demonic entities. Maybe that's a side product, and if so, they should definitely up the price of things like this, but that's not the point. The point is boundaries. Boundaries and communication skills, but both of those things are very easily said and very difficult to actually hold onto. I get questions like this one more or less every month, multiple times per month in one form or another. This idea of wanting protection from negative people or situations. And then people will also associate as being either an empath or a highly sensitive person or someone who's just very spiritually aware of people's energetic situations. Maybe some people have even this idea that they can see auras or thought forms or the different energy which radiates from those people who have malicious intentions, and yet somehow they just keep getting into situations where they allow themselves to be sucked dry or taken advantage of. This is the video where I'm going to try and set that straight. It is as simple as establishing the right boundaries in the right places and defending them, but that's simply said and very difficult to actually do. I want to make it clear as a disclaimer before going ahead with this video that I'm going to be talking about boundaries in more of an everyday sense. So this is conflict at the workplace, conflict with your romantic partner, or parental relationships, or maybe substance misuse. I'm not talking about the really horrific situations where there's been a major trauma and someone's done something horrific. If you're in that situation, I'm heartbroken for you, but that's not what we're talking about today, because that's a very special territory in itself, and I haven't got the full breadth to be able to cover that in a boundary video without going into trauma work in particular. But that all being said, and abuses being accounted for, the boundary question is really the central question of defending your consciousness. But to establish a boundary, here's the kicker. To establish a boundary, you need to care about the person or the thing which you're establishing a boundary around. Much like an artifact in a museum, or a family home with a fence, or even just the fact that we put clothing on our naked bodies. We put some form of boundary to protect ourselves against people or situations that we do not want to have access to ourselves. But to care about yourself is always the foundation. You're not going to be able to actually establish a boundary if you're lying to yourself about caring about yourself or caring about your health in a way that's just completely incongruent. This is the person who time and time again will say that they're going to quit cigarettes, but then 1 week after quitting, they go right back to it because although they set their boundary of I will not smoke, when stress hits, they have got an implicit self-system in place where they do not have the full story put together, not yet at least. They don't have the full story put together that they are worth defending. They don't have that strength of will to be like, those cigarettes are toxic, they don't deserve a place in my life, they deserve, I was going to swear, I'm trying not to swear on these videos, naturally I would swear, but that kind of get off me kind of energy, that's a strong boundary, that's a strong line, that is something which cannot be crossed. It's the same with someone who's going to take advantage of you in a corporate sense. maybe in a business environment, you say, please get those reports to me on time this week because you have to keep chasing up and you're spending many unnecessary hours doing work that you shouldn't have to do because someone else should be doing their job in a way where you don't have to take on their responsibilities. And you say, excuse me, Mr. Smith, can you please get those reports to me because it's important to me to have the reports done every single Friday at 4 o'clock on the dot. And yet your behaviors actually indicate that it's fine if they're in 2 weeks later and there's no consequence, there's no punishment, there's no repercussion, and there's not even energetic validity to you even caring about the boundary because you don't follow through on any kind of consequence in the slightest. Your words don't mean much because you don't think that you mean much. Again, there are situations where people are malicious and malevolent and they're going to be the toxic people who are taking from you. But I've seen again and again in mentorships of people who've struggled with codependency or struggled with holding a boundary against someone who would take their energy, that usually within a few weeks and maximum a few months of working on their self-esteem and working on the childhood issues which led to them feeling like they weren't worth caring about or that their word didn't matter, once we start unpacking those patterns, they almost build boundaries out of nothing. It's like the boundary of self-care and the boundary of self-worth and the boundary of, no, I don't have those kinds of romantic interactions anymore. They almost emanate from the ground. It's like the old stone ruin just comes back to life, and it just happens because a boundary, most boundaries, are a natural extension of a person's self-esteem. And this comes to what we put into our bodies, who we let have access to our bodies, how much time we give to other people, and the whole variety of interpersonal situations that we find ourselves in. But crucially, if you want to defend your consciousness and you want to establish energetic protection, you obviously need to be able to communicate that with communication skills which stand the test of time and can withhold the pressure of unconscious or potentially aggressive individuals. This is particularly difficult for women or men who don't necessarily feel too articulate with their ability to give a reason for why they want something. Let's take an example as a place to launch this from. Let's imagine that you are a person who's establishing the boundary of, I do not anymore. It's difficult to bring an example out, that's why I'm stuttering. Let's think of one. I've got one. You don't want to accept calls every day from a certain person. There's a certain person in your life who calls you every single day, and it's a pattern that is many years outdated, and you no longer want this person to have that much access to your time and energy. You want it to be a situation where you're still in contact with them, maybe a family member, maybe a former lover, maybe a friend, maybe a colleague, once a month, twice a month, once a week at maximum, but not this everyday energetic drain of always picking up the phone and feeling guilty if you don't answer. It's a really common one. It could be a text message as well, always texting someone that you don't want to text. If you don't have the communication skill to firstly establish the boundary of, hey, so-and-so, I really appreciate our friendship, I really appreciate our relationship, I really appreciate our family situation, I'm withdrawing my energy and my attention so that I can focus on me, and these are my guidelines for how much I would want to be contacted. That's not how you say it, but if you can't articulate exactly what you're after in a way which is clear because you haven't paused to think why you actually want a thing, if it's undigested and it's just like, push away, get off me energy, don't be surprised when they come back with massive force. There is an inner work to this element of communication because you need to pre-articulate in your mind what you're going to say to someone. This is very common. You pre-articulate or write out the message or journal out what you want to say to someone, and then you say it, you perform it, you rehearse it, you get ready for the moment. But usually it's not the first conversation which matters. It's the second, the third, the fourth, and the fifth. The communication skill which is lacking in most people when it comes to boundaries and energetic protection is the ability, get it, this is the point of the video, the way to protect your energy is strengthening your ability to reaffirm and recommunicate and reestablish the particular boundary without emotional charge. You don't get upset. You don't get punishing and angry. You calmly restate the intention. I'm going to say to my friend, let's imagine it's my friend again. We'll go with Mr. Smith. I say to my friend, Mr. Smith, I really appreciate our friendship, but I'm not going to be taking calls every single day because I have other things that I need to do with my time, but I would like to have a call with you at least once a month. How are you free on this date? And then 2 days later, he tries to call me again. Mr. Smith, again, I'd love to speak with you. That's why we're going to speak on the 20th, but I am currently busy and, I really can't take calls right now. It's awkward. It's very natural. Next day comes, Mr. Smith tries to call you again, and he is aggressive this time. He's calling you all sorts of names, and he's even saying that you're a bad friend and that you don't care about him. And guess what? There's a whole new trauma in his life, and he's dumping it in your direction. You have a choice there. The choice that most people take is to withdraw from the conversation. They quietly ghost their friend, and they disappear without actually communicating the boundary which they need to reestablish. They tried it once, took a lot of strength. They tried it the second time, and saw the pressure's getting too much, and on the third time, they withdraw. What if on that third time you simply restated, as calmly as you possibly could, Mr. Smith, I really appreciate our friendship, but I'm no longer going to be using my phone as much as I used to. I'm working on X, Y, and Z, but I will call you on the 20th just like we agreed. I'm wishing you all the best. 5 times if necessary. 10 times if necessary. Sure, you can always wave the card of I'm going to ghost this person and never talk to them again, and sometimes that might be appropriate, but if you haven't tried this pattern of calmly recommunicating the same boundary, give it a go. Some people will be completely non-receptive. There are certain people who indicate that in the 5th time in a row of them punching against the boundary, they're a punchy kind of person. Maybe you do want to exit that situation. That's for you to decide. But at the very least, in terms of your autonomy, of feeling like you've got something to be able to actually do with your language, to actually assert a boundary that means something to you, just reassert the simple boundary, the simplest possible boundary, the simplest not this, but this is okay kind of distinction with minimal emotional charge. It works very well in romantic relationships. It works very well in professional relationships. And often people will trip themselves up where either they start digging under their own wall to then be on the other side of it in like a shadow unconscious sense, so they almost bypass their own boundary and put themselves in a position where, oh, I just happened to end up at the supermarket where I know Mr. Smith goes at 11 o'clock on Tuesdays, and you're like, oh, I just felt like, and then you see Mr. Smith and have a 5-hour conversation. People do all kinds of strange and crazy things, but again, it goes back to someone not valuing themselves. And if you don't value yourself, or you have a shame complex or a guilt complex about how much you need to give to someone else, you're always going to be undermining or jumping over your own boundaries, or even indicating like, hey, here's the crack, come right through, and I'm going to be here to give you everything you need kind of patterns. Where do we take it from this point? I want us to take it to a strange wrapping up point with a book that I've got that's almost 60 years old. It's a book on animal psychology, and it's a book called The Territorial Imperative, as you can see right there. And it looks at the biology and the origins of, well, land acquisition. The reason I'm bringing this up, although it's very weird, is this particular idea. Hopefully I can find a nice extract for you. There we go. It's a beautiful 60-year-old book. It's got all these wonderful illustrations about different types of animal behaviors when it comes to claiming a territory and defending something which they hold to be theirs. It's a very primal thing. My favorite extract is about the robins, the red-breasted English robin. If you're an English person or you've ever seen English robins, they're very loud and musical birds. They have beautiful songs. But what we don't often realize is that the song is a way that they assert their boundary. Robins, male robins, are so territorial that they will defend their territory with their bird song to signal via the kind of wavelengths that they're putting out that this is my branch, or this is my tree, this is my field, and come no further, Mr. Competitor Robin. And then you'll see these robins often getting into very vicious fights, and there's really interesting extracts in this book, which, if you want to read a 60-year-old book on animal psychology, it's really wonderfully written. They don't write books like that anymore. It's 1960s, like zoology, witty English humor. Yeah, we can see just how old this pattern of territory acquisition and territory defense is inside of our psyche. It's deep at the bottom of the brainstem. It's something which lives inside of our guts. And if you're a healthy, red-blooded man, very cliche phrase, but if you are tapped into that primal energy, you will have a lot of this, like, stake your claim and build a wall around something kind of consciousness. What happens if you take that too far? You obviously become tyrannical. If you establish too much of a boundary, and this is why I want to go into it, if, like the robin, the male robin, you sing your bird song so loudly that no other robins come in, and you have all the mating opportunities and feeding opportunities that you desire, and get to raise your wonderful little robin family, fantastic. That's not the world that we live in, and there's going to be a lot of conflict and competition where the other robins are going to come in and try and steal your seeds and take off with your chick, quite literally. Don't get too aggressive. That is my number one invitation for men. You need to really calmly assert the boundary in a way which isn't punitive. I think the natural overcompensation for most men is to get so hyper assertive, and you see this in the like really aggressive handshaking behaviors or otherwise taking control of situations way beyond what's appropriate. Just calm it down. I played into the energy there of really getting worked up, and I got so off balance. And here we go. I'm back in balance. We need to pay attention to this. Women can also fall victim to this pattern. They'll often use reputation destruction, or they will use their tongue in an unskillful way to attack or criticize or condemn someone that they're supposedly trying to repair with. They're trying to repair a relationship or establish a boundary because they care about continuing that way of relating with someone. They just don't want all of their energy wrapped up in a certain pattern that doesn't work for them. Don't get caught up in the territorial imperative to try and gain more and more territory at the detriment of healthy relating to yourself and other people. Don't be like the bold robin who, this is crazy, there was an experiment that was done in this book. I think they took a stick and they took a red glove and kind of put some feathers on it, and they put this stick that was simulating a robin in the field of one of the male robins, and the male robin fought this stick, like pecking around and really flapping against it for 4 or 5 hours to the point of exhaustion and passing out. This robin was fighting for its life because it's so deeply ingrained that his survival depends upon his territory. It depends upon his boundary. His ability to maintain the boundary of his feeding and mating potential is what guarantees life or death. We have something inside of us that feels the same, which is why we get so upset and feel such a sense of injustice if someone goes against our boundaries. We also feel shame as well if we get caught naked at a time when we're not meant to be naked. Or Immanuel Kant said Immanuel Kant said once that when he was caught praying, he was deeply ashamed because it's meant to be a private act. If someone catches us beyond our boundary or goes beyond our boundary in a way which feels humiliating, we obviously want to either shrink away and disappear or destroy that person. It's somewhere on that spectrum. Most people won't go all the way in either direction, but will get a very natural response. To understand the deep animal psychology of why we have that response helps us to understand why it's so important to protect our energy. But the majority of our protection, once more to wrap this video up, is not in the spiritual pursuit of angelic guidance from the unseen realms. It's using your language to be able to clearly articulate to people what you do and do not accept. But before you go to the stage of communicating outwards, you can sit with yourself and decide for yourself what you will or will not accept. And once you have a clear moral compass inside of you, and you know, by and large, what your yes is and what your no is, you won't even be in situations where you're having conversations with a friend who turns out to be toxic 4 months into the friendship, because you knew from the very beginning that based on a certain behavior that they have, they are not a resonance with who you are as a person. And you don't go down the whole pathway. There's pre-communication that goes on inside of you, and the articulation of your integrity at a private level, privately articulating in clear language, I do this and I don't do this, I prefer this, but I don't prefer that. Someone can get this close, but not that close, that will really give you a lot of ease, because if you're going to be in that charged conversation and you're going to try and be calm when establishing that boundary and you don't actually know where the boundary is, someone who's going to try and take advantage of you will definitely take advantage of you because they can sense your weakness there. You don't need to punish them, but everyone deserves to be strong in their sense of autonomy and identity. But you need to use language, and you need to calmly, genuinely, repeatedly re-establish that boundary with yourself. You can't say to other people, I value my time and my energy, and you're not allowed to have it if you truly don't value your time and your energy. Your subconscious is very particular. You will know that you're lying to yourself and you're not valuing yourself via your actions. Therefore, Mr. Smith comes along and says, hey, can I have 5 hours of your time on the phone? And you may complain, but the reality is you just spent 5 hours on your phone watching YouTube shorts. So just a natural extension of your weak character and lack of integrity to give Mr. Smith the next 5 hours of your time. You can never escape yourself, is the bottom line. You won't be able to establish a boundary that means something for you if you are not actually establishing a boundary for who you are. You can establish boundaries for future ideals. You can reach towards new standards of being. This is what happens when someone quits an addiction or releases a certain substance. They establish a boundary in the future, and it also extends down into the present, and they change who they are and they grow along that spiral staircase. But don't get caught up in the pattern of thinking that you've established a boundary which means something if it doesn't mean anything to you, when you're really honest with yourself. That's the best I can offer you in regards to energetic protection. It's honesty, it's articulation, and it's repeatedly establishing a boundary in a very real and pragmatic sense. I hope this video has been useful for you. If it has been useful, leave a comment in the comments description if you want to take it in a new direction. I answer almost every single comment as personally as I can, and I might make another video or two on boundaries if you want to go in an even more niche direction. Just let me know where you want me to take off my hat and unplug my mind and find some information for you. Nonetheless, that's the end of the video. My voice is going, and I will see you on the next video where hopefully my voice is restored, but better do my boundary work and my articulation work to make sure that this is a real possibility. Otherwise, I'm lying to myself. Next video.